Hello, I'm Paul Louis Metzger, the Director of the Institute for Cultural Engagement, New Wine, New Wineskins. Welcome to New Wine Tastings. And I'm here with Trudi Sang, a long-standing friend of mine and New Wine, New Wineskins, and an advisor at New Wine, New Wineskins. And Trudi, we're dealing with this theme of disabilities, and I wanted to ask you to share with us about your personal story concerning your interest and connection with the disability community.
Thank you for having me. It all started when I first had my first master's degree, and it was focused on education with early childhood as well as special ed. Little did I know that that was setting the stage for when 4 years later I'd be encountering and dealing with my son, who is diagnosed with Fragile X syndrome, which exhibits itself very similar to autism. And so there began a journey of advocating, of resourcing, and supporting him.
And what are some of the challenges that you have faced in advocating for your family members with disabilities?
I think the biggest piece, as well as with my son and also my brother-in-law, who also has a type of autism behavior, is that finding resources and getting those resources and the financial backing to make sure those things are supported. And sometimes it's just really hard to network as well as feel supported. And I think the disability population tends to be very isolated.
So what have you experienced, in light of that last answer, in trying to build a network of people and services aimed at supporting the disability community?
I am so passionate about trying to get people connected. I was part of a support group for my son when he was little, and as time went on, it was so important to make sure that people were supported and connected and collaborating and resourcing. Obviously, the financial piece has been something that's always on the alert because of funding and political changes. That's always something you have to keep an ear to. But also, as your children and your people that have disabilities change and go into different seasons, sometimes your resources have to change. And it's not always where people are collaborating and resourcing together and saying, oh, well, here's a resource for you. A lot of times it takes a lot of almost detective work to find people. And it's amazing to me how the resources aren't connected to each other and aren't always aware of how to collaborate. And so not only are families siloed and isolated, sometimes the services are too, and that becomes very problematic.
So how are you working to address that isolation, that sense of lack of resources, lack of awareness that's so often so present? How are you going about addressing that? And with that, what are your hopes for the disability network you are seeking to establish in connection to New Wine?
Well, it was so exciting to have the spring conference really hone in on the needs of disabilities.
Yeah, can you speak to the conference?
The spring conference for New Wine, New Wineskins was a isolation to invitation, and that encompassed individuals, families, services, resources, providers, and faith community. And it was such a broad spectrum of individuals that came, and that was exciting to have people of similar concerns and passions in one place. But that was only scratching the surface. I mean, it opened the door for us to be able to bring forth awareness, and now I think it's time to go even deeper. Over the last several months and maybe a couple years, I've been connecting with a lot of people in the west side of Portland, providers, resources, and networks, and we've been getting together and just praying together and sharing together. And what we're finding is these resources are saying, wow, you do this well, and I do this well. Rather than us all trying to do everything, how can we collaborate and support each other? That is so exciting. And what I'd love to see is that to broaden into the east side as well as be more established on the west side as well. And that way we aren't reduplicating or trying to overwhelm ourselves with just trying to service everything.
So you'll be doing that in conjunction with New Wine, trying to build that network?
Yeah, done some surveying, and we're trying to get surveys back to get where are the gaps, where are the holes, where are the needs? How can we start connecting the dots and bring forth a resource so that people know where to go? Right now, there's not a real stabilized resource for people to go, oh, I need this, or where can I find this, or how can I get help on this? And it's right now, it's you have to know the right people and know who to ask. And I think that's sad because it could be so much richer.
Well, I'm hopeful that this network in the area can be established. And so, do you have any closing thoughts?
I think that it's our society in the Northwest tends to be very prideful of their self-sufficiency and individuality, which is wonderful, but it also creates isolation and siloing. And then you add the component of disability or special needs on top of that, and just imagine that isolation going even deeper. And it's almost an invisible population that ends up being unserviced in our faith communities as well as in our communities at large. And I'd love to see these individuals embraced and invited and participating in what our community can do together.
Wonderful. Thank you, Trudi.
You're welcome.
Trudi Sang, Louis Metzger, New Wine Tastings. Thank you for joining us.